Today's edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPad and iPhone, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPad and iPhone, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. And by Mac Voices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like Mac Voices, Mac Voices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for Mac Voices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome back to Mac Notables on Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been an embarrassingly long time since we got a chance to chat with Mr. Andy Ihnatko, but we're going to fix that right now. Andy, it's great to have you back.
Great to be back, Chuck. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, how does this happen? It just, the days slide into weeks, the weeks slide into months, and suddenly we're saying it's been too long.
Well, you know, it takes a national crisis like the one that we've been suffering over the past month and a half to make us all reach out and find solace in human connection again, so we can have Donald Trump to thank for at least one thing.
I was going to ask you to clarify the national crisis, but now I understand. Got it.
Pick one, man. Wow, 2015. Am I right?
Yeah,
they had to send the Pope in to mop some stuff up. That's how bad 2015 has been so far.
I hadn't exactly thought about it in that regard, but that's an interesting point.
they don't send him out just for anything. But they got now that there's Skype. I mean, he can just sort of phone it in. A lot of this stuff. Boy. He said, nope, this time, Heavenly Father, the pontiff said, boots on the ground. We're going to need some boots on ground intel on this. Okay.
I got to go do some research on this.
You go in with the benediction that you have, not the benediction that you want to have.
It sounds like a paraphrase from Batman, I think. Anyway, before we get into a discussion of everything we're going to discuss, I want to make sure we let folks know where you've been, because it's not like you've been hiding under a rock. You're doing a lot of other things in a lot of different areas other than just the Chicago Sun-Times tech column thing.
Yeah, that's been what I've been doing since about 2000, so that's like 15-year anniversary of that. I didn't get the China soup tureen from the newspaper for that, but they continue to employ me, which is nice. I'm doing now 3 different podcasts. One for Twit about the Mac. I'm doing a Google podcast on Relay.fm. I'm still doing my personal podcast pretty much every Monday on 5x5. It's like, you know, as more of your friends keep starting podcasting networks, you find yourself doing more and more shows. I also started doing a column for cars.com about car technology last month, which is turning out to be a lot of fun. And a lot of stuff for Boing, a lot of stuff for other folks. It's nice to be in a position where, you know, you keep having ideas for stuff, and maybe you've already sort of filled your quota for the newspaper for the week and saying, okay, well, who do I think would enjoy having this, and who do I want to work with again, and that sort of stuff. So it's pretty lucky.
Yeah, and I know there are a couple in there I wasn't even aware of. So thank you for adding to my reading list. So, Andy, you might be the perfect guy to ask this, and this really wasn't on my slate, but I'll do it anyway. With you're doing 3 podcasts. Is this the new way for a journalist to get their material out? As opposed to, say, signing up for a couple more newspapers, a couple more magazines, a couple more websites? Do you find yourself taking more control of it, or is it just something to do?
Well, there's never been more opportunities for a writer to build an audience or publish stuff. Because, you know, even if nobody that I've been working with for the past 5 or 10 years has any interest in something that I've just written, I have my own site. And if I wanted to turn that into something more like a commercial endeavor, I could, with maybe 2 or 3 days worth of full-time work, wire it up so that I can take ads, set up partnerships so I can take sponsors. You've never been more in control of your own destiny than right now, and really, it's I'd be maybe going too far to call it a golden age, but I think the ideal has always been that people who are good or want to be good or just want to take an active hand in a certain job, they shouldn't have to get permission to do that. They just should demonstrate they have the will to do it. Because if they still keep doing it day after day, week after week, month after month, they will inevitably put in those 10,000 hours and they'll get really good at it. And with podcasting, it's like there's I wouldn't say that I redefined what my job was, but about 5 or 6 years ago, I was sort of thinking about, well, given that there's so many different ways that I can share my point of view, what is my job if it's not necessarily as a writer? If most of the stuff is happening electronically, I'm not technically a newspaper columnist. I'm just a columnist. And you just realize that, well, you're an educator. I feel as though I'm an educator. That my job is to spend a lot more time having a lot more experiences and being a lot more obsessive about certain things than a lot of people are able or willing to be. And so when I state an opinion about a piece of news or a new piece of hardware or a new software service, I feel as though I've done a lot of work to deliver a lot of help in the 5, 10, or 20 minutes it takes to read my stuff. And so on that basis, why wouldn't I take advantage of an opportunity to share that point of view with people through a medium that maybe I'm not reaching some people with what I'm writing, but there are a lot of people who they work out, they drive long commutes, they get a lot of information through podcasts. And again, I'm very, very lucky that I have a lot of opportunities to do that. If not, I would not have an actual dedicated studio in my office with a really hot 10,000 watt light and a custom rig for my camera and a really nice microphone. It's also a nice change of pace, if I'm honest. Today I wrote about 3,000 or 4,000 words. I published about 1,000 of those. To say nothing of like all the emails and all the research that had to be done to the stuff I'm working on right now. It's nice to be able to simply sit down and see somebody face to face or face to phosphor, as the case may be, and just be able to talk like a normal person, as opposed to, is that a preposition? Should that word be there? Ah, damn it. Let's highlight and check the dictionary. Oh, okay, that is a preposition. I probably shouldn't put that there.
You couch yourself as an educator, and I think that's interesting because I see you as part educator, part entertainer, and I mean that only in this with the sincerest form of a compliment, because you don't just deliver the stuff straight. You provide some energy and some entertainment with it, which is, I think, one of the secrets of your success, whether you recognize it or not.
Well, I'm pretty excited about the work I do. And so if I do the work well, then that excitement is going to be shared with people. And also early on, when I was 18 or 19, when I got my first column, this occurred to me right from day one that there are a lot of people who can write columns about the news and write columns about what Apple's doing and write reviews and roundups of software and hardware. The key is, for me, to get people to read what I write, whether they're interested in the topic or not. It's a way to sort of trick people into learning about a problem regarding their personal privacy and security that might make their eyes glaze over, and they're not sort of in the mood for something that took 3 or 4 weeks to research that involved talking to 4 different law enforcement agencies, 2 off the record. But I felt as though if they keep coming back simply because whatever it is, it's going to be entertaining, it's going to be interesting it's going to be at least lively and interesting to read, then that's a good way to, again, trick people into learning things that you think is really valuable for them. And even if that weren't true, again, why would you want to bore people with what you do? Again, if you're doing something that you love, you do something that's exciting, that excitement is going to rub off on the person who's experiencing that. And that's even true if what you do is you build screen doors when you do home renovations. There are people who, if you ever seen Norm Abram build screen doors, he builds screen doors with joy. And that comes through just watching him just knock out these screen doors. He's proud of how well they're made, how quickly, all the techniques that he's mastered to get these banged out so quickly. And you could, as a result, I'm not interested in making screen doors myself, but I could watch him make screen doors all day long. So that's kind of what I'm after here.
I think you succeed, and I don't think some others succeed. Your passion comes through. You never seem to get tired of it. You seem to just revel in covering the tech that you do and doing social commentary, whatever it is that you're doing, you seem to be very passionate about it. Passion is where podcasting started. And I feel like at times for some people, some of that's been lost as it's become a bit more businesslike.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I do think there are parallels to the early days of television where you forget that most of the hosts of early television were local newspaper columnists. Ed Sullivan was a local New York, well, okay, New York City, but still a city newspaper theater writer, and he was way too ugly to be on TV. Even 5 years after he was hired to host his show, but it was a time where they would want both the credibility of someone who is a recognizable name, at least even in a local market, and also someone who is experienced at putting together a half hour of information on a regular basis. And that's you go to the newspaper columnists. Of course, newspapers had a much bigger role back then, but that's a side issue. So I'm sort of thinking about what happens in another 5 or 10 years. When it becomes, wow, that Andy Ihnatko, he's real. I mean, he's interesting and he gets his facts straight and he's entertaining, but he's too ugly for a podcast. He's not good looking enough for podcasting. It's like when you see these network crime dramas, and you know that part of the pitch was, she's assigned to the force after years working on farms in Amish communities, and she's hot. And she's teamed up with a hard-bitten, grizzled sergeant lieutenant who's been there and done that, and he's hot. It's like, okay. Good. I'm sure this will be different from the other cop show featuring all super hot-looking people.
Yeah.
Law of averages, man. It's got to pay off sometime.
I confess, I did not know that about Ed Sullivan. That's an interesting, or for that matter, early TV show host. So, yeah, there's definitely a parallel there.
Of course, they got them from a lot of different places, but again, the other change was that remember that television in the early days was not an attractive move for anybody. If you were going into television, that means that you were taking a step down from whatever career that you were supposed to be on right now, and so you got people either who were grateful for the opportunity to play in a new medium, or like me, we're thinking that, hey, here's something. This is going to be a little bit of an adventure, and we can learn a new skill. And here is a way to take the things that we want to share with people and share them with people who are not picking up a newspaper every single day.
Interesting. You're very much a student of the entertainment industry, because I find it seems like your commentary, especially podcasts, sort of peppered with that, with not just the knowledge of it, but just once again the passion for it, the enjoyment of it.
I read a lot and I remember some of it. Maybe that's all there is to it.
Interesting. So let's shift it around. There's so many things, but well, you know what? No, I'm going to change that. I'm going to go back and follow the path we were on. You were talking about, if you wanted to, you could, tweak your site and accept sponsors and ads and all that, which brings us to ad blockers. Is this going to fundamentally change some of the way we see the web right now as it has developed? Is this going to kill some of the democratization of the web and the information that it's available there, or is this just a little blip in the continuum, and we're going to pretty much keep on going in the same trajectory?
We're going to keep on going, maybe not necessarily in the same trajectory. I think what we're looking at right here is something that's very common to the human experience, where you will have a relationship that can be very contentious, whether it's within your family or within your workplace or just within neighbors. And it's just little things, little annoyances where someone steps a little bit too close over your border. So you say, okay, that was just the one time, I'll just adjust the border. Or someone starts playing their radio at 10 o'clock at night, where you're like, okay, well, I don't go to sleep until 11 o'clock anyway. And it's not like it's happening every weeknight, but boy, it's happening more often than I'd like. And then at some point it just blows over, and now you really have to have it out and decide how we're going to make this relationship continue to work. And that's the relationship between publishers and readers, about how to monetize content that gets published. I keep likening the current situation to like a World War I battlefield, where it's been fought and land lost and won so many times that now there are no features left on this landscape. There are no trees. It's not even many hills anymore. There's just this plain of mud that now you can build something brand new on top of, because there has to be a way to pay for the content that gets created. A lot of it is as a labor of love. There are many people who are certainly willing and able to spend many years just blogging because they're enjoying it. And then, oh my God, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, they finally look at the stats, realize that they're getting 500,000 unique visitors a month. And now there's enough of an audience they can actually start to place ads on this thing and start to and achieve two dreams. Number one, not have to be paying for this server out of your own pocket and losing money every month, but also maybe instead of having to do this tech consulting job 5 days a week, maybe I can actually stay home with my kids, up the professionalism with which I do my writing and I do my podcasting, and actually turn this into a job and God willing, a career. But again, money has to come from somewhere. The flip side of that are organizations like iMore, where they will actually pay very talented people actual salaries and health benefits, and they'll pay their travel expenses and all that other kind of stuff, and that has to be paid for with something. And so it's a fight because they need to be able to deliver an audience, which means that it's likely that they're going to be putting more, at least be hearing arguments internally from the business side that maybe we should be putting more ads on the site. Or if there's not enough engagement, maybe we can find a way to make the ads impossible to ignore, that you have to interact with them in some fashion in order to see the content. But as soon as you start to get more annoying, the readers start to rebel, not by saying, screw you, you have no right to make money, but simply by saying, you're making it too hard for me to enjoy your wonderful website. And so the web browsers deploy a countermeasure, and then the ad network deploys a countermeasure to the countermeasure, and again you volleying missiles and bombs and cannon fire, and that's how you wind up with that scorched earth terrain. But again, right now we're at the point where we're now having an active discussion, I think, about what is the relationship between a website and the reader. What responsibilities do the readers have toward the providers of this content? Where if I suddenly say, look, everybody has to give me $1, one thin dollar a month in order to keep reading this stuff, and then you see everybody completely disappear immediately because they just don't want to be bothered, or they will try to find a way that they'll find someone else who is going to find a Google search trick that will get past the paywall and make that happen. So there's a lot of acrimony, there's a lot of animosity, and the last part of this is that, good heavens, a lot of these methods for monetizing a website are so obnoxious and so intrusive and inflict so much damage on your computer, your device, and even your sense of security and privacy that you really have to deploy some sort of countermeasure to prevent tracking cookies, to prevent JavaScript from running, because at best you want to make sure that your laptop that's supposed to get 9 hours worth of battery life doesn't suddenly get only 5.5 because there's so many scripts running to serve ad networks. And at worst, you don't want to be in that position where you're interviewing for a job. It's finally down to you and 3 other people, and the company decides to use the services of a consultant that tries to find as much information as possible to advise this potential employer. And one of these people uses the services of one of these networks that simply says, tell me everything that you believe to be true about Chuck Joyner. And they will simply take this, it's true, they take this wild guess based on your browsing history and simply say, we believe that he fits the profile of someone who doesn't really focus very much, who would probably jump from job to job, who gets bored really, really easily. And there's no scientific basis for this, but someone just spent $900 for this piece of information, and there's really nothing you can do to stop it. Just on principle, I don't like to have that kind of flow of information going out.
Ted Landau and I had this discussion a couple days ago. Do you feel that there's a moral obligation on the part of the reader not to use ad blockers, or has the social contract, been violated by the web publishers? Some web publishers, not everybody, folks, but some web publishers, because of the way they have escalated the war that you're talking about?
I have difficulty saying that there's an ethical problem, because that means that I'm telling other people what they should believe is right and wrong. and even in killing another human being, it can be a little bit nebulous sometimes. So let's imagine how flexible using ad blockers is. I can only talk about how I feel about it. I don't have an ethical problem with using ad blockers in general, because I believe that the central principle of the web is that whoever publishes something on the web has no expectation that they're going to be able to control what that content looks like on the other side. And that's as simple as this person doesn't know if I'm going to be reading it on a big 27-inch screen or on a 13-inch laptop or on a 4.8-inch diagonal phone. They don't know if I'm on a phone and my connection to mobile broadband is terrible, so I'm going to turn off images just so the things load in faster. Or that maybe I have vision problems, so I'll thank God bless you for selecting all those fancy schmancy fonts, but I have to use this very, very simple version of Helvetica and scale it way up so that I can even read what you're doing. As you're publishing, you have no reasonable expectation that however it is you sent that page out of your server, it's going to land on that screen the way that you intended it to be. Which means that you have to be prepared for that user to decide to tell that browser to do whatever that user wants that browser to do to render that page in a way that pleases and is most useful to that user. Now, the reason why I'm sort of enabled to think this way is that if I'm already saying that I have, as a reader and as a user, have the right to control what happens on my computer, it's also true that you, the publisher, have the right to control what happens on your server. So it's not hard to add some script to your server that says, check to see if this browser is capable of running JavaScript, and if that is turned off, do not serve the page. Check to see if it was able to, the ad network was able to connect to the ad network, and if that was stopped, do not load the page. All this sort of stuff they can say if they want to. If they're saying that it's really important that this content is not read unless ads are displayable or participation in an ad network is completely active, you have to make that decision known by telling your server, here are the terms under which this reader is allowed to access this content. And if you don't, you can certainly be quite upset about what users are doing. You can certainly be quite worried about the dip in your ad revenue, but you don't really have any basis in which to say that this user is doing something that is universally wrong. Again, that does mean that, you are free to make your own determinations on a case-by-case basis about what is right and what is wrong. If some of my favorite websites were using obtrusive ads, I would probably use a feedback form to say, I can't use your site anymore because it slows down my entire browser to a crawl. And I almost have, it is actually true that I have 4 different web browsers installed on my MacBook because sometimes I need to isolate a certain website. Or I've got so many tabs and windows open on Safari that I need to open Opera just so that I can have one clean web browser that can open this one page. So if I choose to suspend Safari, I can still do something in Opera. But I'm saying that you have to decide for yourself if you're doing something that is right or doing something wrong. I believe that in principle, ad blockers are okay. It's more okay, certainly, if the ad blocker is sophisticated enough to let you say, okay, you know what, whatever it is that the imore.com site wants to do, let it do it. Shut off everything else, all other sites, but I'm adding this site to a whitelist. I want to support it I'm willing to give up certain things that I want in order to get this content and to make sure that Renee Ritchie and Peter Cohen and Serenity Caldwell can do this full time and get paid and have dental coverage.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPad and iPhone, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disklabel. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. I'm betting that you use PDFs in one way or another on a pretty regular basis. At least every week, maybe every day, maybe even multiple times a day. That's why you need PDF Pen from Smile. With PDF Pen, you can do everything to PDFs that you want to do. that you need to do. Mark them up. Securely redact them so that the parts you don't want read can't be read. With PDFpen Pro, you can take it a step farther. Run your PDFs through optical character recognition so that they become editable text. Export them to Microsoft Word, export them to Excel, export them to PowerPoint. And that's just the beginning. Create and edit fillable PDF forms. Create a document table of contents. Scan material directly to PDF from a scanner. Sign PDFs with your signature. Convert entire websites to PDFs so you can read them offline. The list goes on and on. The fun doesn't stop there, though. With PDFpen for iPhone and iPad, some of the most powerful features of PDFpen are available on your iPhone or your iPad, so you can work on the go. Want to tap all that power quickly and easily? Michael E. Cohen helps you do it in Take Control style with Take Control of PDFpen 7. With Michael's help, you'll be a PDFpen power user in no time. Don't take my word for it, though. Download a trial version of PDFpen from smilesoftware.com and find out just how much you can do with a PDF. That's PDFpen and PDFpen Pro for Mac, and PDFpen for iPhone and iPad for iOS, all from Smile, the makers of world-class software. Thanks to Smile for being the longest-running sponsor of MacVoices. You make a great point and a really interesting point that as a publisher, I have the right to control what happens on my server or how my server reacts. I started as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, paywall. Paywall is just another way of controlling access to the content. What you were saying was the other. From a reader's side, though, isn't someone that is enforcing that kind of thing almost committing financial suicide? Because if they put up a block like that and I hesitate to use iMore just because I really respect Renee and Peter and Serenity and what they do, but if Site X does this too many times, not only I'm probably not going to visit their forum because I'm never going to get to it, but there's also the issue of I'm going to vote with my feet and walk away, and therefore they've lost me completely. So I guess I can't. I've been struggling with this myself, just trying to figure out where it is where the line is for me. And happily, MacVoices does not serve a whole lot of ads. There are a few things in there, and unfortunately, there are probably some trackers in there I'm not even aware of because of the fact that you embed code to pull, say, something from Amazon or some other places. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think we need to have more of it so that everybody understands the implications on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, exactly. And part of it is just the first time you see that little pop-up or that little banner that appears saying, I see that you've turned off JavaScript and you have an ad blocker running, would you consider giving us a whitelist exception because here is what we're trying to serve for you, and we try to be a little more conservative in the sort of ads that we send you. In the end, though, it's there's just an old saying that there's a Aesop's fable that I've converted for modern times, and the lesson is that, like, if you want to control an egg, you do not do it by tightening your grip on the egg, because otherwise you lose the egg. The more pressure you put on it, it breaks and you squirts all over the place and you lose the egg completely. And that's sort of what happens when you have audiences. The more that you pressure that you put on an audience, the less control you're going to have over them, because at some point you'll put too much pressure on them. They'll go someplace else and you've lost them. If you want to still have this egg, you have to support this egg. And that's how you maintain it, by making sure that your audience knows that you're here trying to do things that it's going to approve of and it's going to enjoy. And that includes giving you the content that you really, really like, and hopefully not serving and not monetizing it in such a way that it's an undue burden for your readers. But it's water has a way of finding its own correct level. If the system has been stressed to failure, at some point it will resolve itself, where advertisers are going to find a way to serve ads that don't get readers this disappointed and this actively resistant to them. And at some point, publishers are going to find a way to make it really, really clear to readers that if you don't support us in some way, this all goes away. I'm not someone who is has a day job per se, and 3 or 4 nights a week I excitedly write about 1,000 words, put it on a blog post. I have to actually be supporting the amount of money it costs to have a roof over my head and to feed myself and all that other sort of cool stuff. And I think that for everybody who is operating at different levels, there's a way of communicating that this is what happens when you make it really hard for me to make money off of stuff. That said, you do have to hold your nose and jump in. I mean, I've had this off and on project all year to do some self-publishing because my last book project was 3 years ago, and it was just such a pain and was such a time suck and such a source of stress that I decided that, and also the book publishing is not doing that well, that I decided that, you know what, I can probably take that time and apply it someplace else more productively. But nonetheless, there are things I'd like to publish in book format. And so you do all this research and say, well, do you want to create this as a business? Do you want to have your own publishing imprint? And what can you reasonably charge for this? And how do you promote it? And I keep coming down to the idea that, no, I'm going to charge $2.99. And if people come back to me and say that, yeah, but gosh, the thing is that you wrote is only like 10,000 words, and you can get like 30, 40, 50,000 words for like 99 cents, or even if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, it's part of the Amazon lending library. And I said, yeah, you're right. You absolutely shouldn't pay me $2.99 for this 11,000 word thing that I published. And they might be expecting you. No, I'm not making a counter argument to you. You should definitely not give me $2. I'm saying that I want $2.99 for everything that I publish. And it's also, and you can also say things like, I'm not giving away my content for free. I could be blogging every single day and letting you letting you visit the website. I'm not willing to do that because my personal. I'm saying that not a fictional character, not necessarily me. I have decided that at no point, I don't want to send the message that the work that I do has no monetary value. You need to put some skin in this game by giving me some money for I'm going to publish it as an EPUB book. You have to put some skin in the game by giving me some money. And even if it means that I make $500 every 2 months instead of $500 a week, that's okay by me, because this is what makes me happy in creating this sort of stuff. And you just simply have to decide what is of value to you as a publisher, what you can live with, and then move forward from there.
This conversation has gotten deep. It really has. But I think it's, again, I think we need to have the conversation. People need to understand it from both sides. It's real easy to say, well, I don't create content, because I'm sure a lot of the listeners and viewers don't necessarily create content in the web publishing sense. But they need to see that side of it, because they do something in their day jobs that creates value. And what if they weren't paid for that value? And the same thing, about with what we're talking about. What you do create is value. It's out there. It's delivered maybe in a different format than the guy who fixes the refrigerator or mows the lawn, but it still needs to be paid for.
Yeah. Oh, again, if the person who's creating it wants to be paid for it, and that's part of the difficulty that this new creative economy is creating, because it frustrates. I have friends who are professional photographers, and I made a certain mistake that I decided not to repeat. There was a chowder competition, big one, that it gets like about 10,000 people here in New England every single year. And the organizer was nice enough to just give me press credentials for it, even though I was not necessarily writing about it for the Sun Times. But I photography is a hobby. I enjoy taking pictures. And as a thank you, every year I would say, oh, by the way, I've edited down my album, and here's a link to like the full size versions, and use them like however you see fit. And then they wanted to use some for a print brochure, and they said, well, how much would you charge to give us like the rights so that we can actually use this like and print it like in posters and stuff like that. Didn't know what to charge. Asked a photographer friend, and he was like, no, you have to ask the complete going rate, and here's the deal that you have to do, and here's the contract. And I was sort of willing to say, well, how about give me $100, enough for like have like a nice night out in the town, and that'll be it. And I think that again, you can only go from your own personal decision of what's right and what's wrong in any sort of situation. Under the circumstances, I believe that that was sort of uncouth for me to suddenly turn into a professional photographer and do that sort of stuff. Even if the stuff that I was doing was professional level work, I felt what I wanted to do instinctively was thank you for all the help that you've given me to allow me to cover this event like a professional photographer would, even though I'm just simply learning how to shoot these sort of events. As a sign of my gratitude, here are my pictures, and by all means, use what you'd like. And that is, again, professionals are not wrong to be aghast that there are people like me doing that. And my doing that is kind of screwing them a lot, because I put a lot of pictures up on Flickr. I used to have them all released as Creative Commons. Just use them however you want, non-commercially. Just credit me and don't modify me as the Creative Commons I was using, which meant that if you are doing a presentation, if you are doing an ad, okay, that wouldn't apply for an ad, but a lot of circumstances that would require you to go to a stock image library and license a photo and give someone money is now short-circuited, because they can just simply go onto Flickr, search for a certain topic that has the correct Creative Commons license, or find photos that people have actually released into the public domain, in which case you can do whatever you want with them. And that really cuts off professional photographers at the knees. There's nothing they can really do about it. My point of view as a writer is that I feel as though the more people who are in the pool, the better the party. And the more voices get to share their own perspectives and their own takes on Apple Watch or a Google invasion of privacy, or the latest Lenovo laptop, the more voices, the greater the chorus, the greater the conversation that ensues. I would love to be back in when I started, mid 1990s, early 1990s, where you would have to go through a gauntlet of editors just to have your stuff considered for publication, because that was pretty damn sweet. I mean, there are very few people that have the reputation that can be hired to write magazine columns and offer their opinions to the public. It's much better now that the quality of the conversation is so much better. I simply have to adapt as a professional to figure out how I'm going to continue to exist in a world where somebody who simply writes one thing a year but is brilliant about it is just as valuable when they put their review of iOS 9 next to my review. And the fact that I've been doing this since the mid-90s and that this review was one of 5 things I published that week, that doesn't mean anything. You have to simply figure out how to live in the world that you live in. And if you can't live in that world, find another world that has similar gravity and atmosphere and take your luck there.
And I guarantee you there are a lot of people that do blogging, that do photography and all, that have really never thought about the fact that they are competing. Maybe they're not intentionally competing, but they are competing with the professionals out there. They're competing for eyeballs. If they're blogging, they're competing. If they're putting, like you said, the pictures out with Creative Commons, you don't realize what effect you might be having on the whole ecosystem. Just something you got to think about. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it if it's a stepping stone to where you want to get, wherever that is. But it may affect the ecosystem that is there once you get to that point.
Yeah. Well, and also, oftentimes these changes can point out an industry or even a whole vocation that has sort of passed its time. You can see, we're both old enough to remember what it was like to go to the grocery store or the supermarket and see these beautiful hand-painted signs that just simply says Vidalia onions, 69 cents a pound. But they're hand-lettered, and this person cranks out 100 of these signs every single afternoon, and they're so good with that brush, and they spent years learning this technique, and everyone is a work of art somewhere in this office. I bought a really nice panoramic photo from like 1920 something, and I took it apart to like have it reframed, and the backing board was one of these sort of a sign that must have been in some department store advertising, basically telling you how much these ladies' dresses were, and it was just a sign saying here's how much this dress is, but again, beautiful hand painted every letter form, and you can and all those folks, I'm sure, who are in that business were incredibly frustrated when now these stores are just printing out cheap paper signs, or people who are running their own little. They downloaded an app for $100, bought a $200 printer, and now for a fraction of the price that the hand painted signs are, they can simply crank out as many of these big banner signs as possible, and it's terrible because these signs aren't nearly as pretty as those hand painted signs, but it reminds us that the point of that sign was not to create Medici-style patronage for a beautiful art form. It was to let people know how much Vidalia onions are, so that if you're driving right past, you would say, wow, we need onions. That's a good price on onions. We're going to go in and buy some of those onions. So sometimes things die, but other organisms come in to take their place. And just as I thought when I was offered a job as a movie critic early in my career, you have to take responsibility and look into your career and realize that if I take this career move, this is the early days of the web, and at the end of the day, a movie critic is just offering their own personal opinion on a movie in a really clever and insightful way, and anybody can do that. And once this web thing takes off, anybody is going to be able to write that, and the first person to be fired from a newspaper when they have to start like trimming the fat is going to be the movie critic. So you have to. You can be sad that the sign painting is dying off. You can try to preserve it as best you can, but you have to acknowledge that this is not a 2015 industry, and nobody has an obligation to keep an industry alive.
Speaking of 2015 industries and obligations, how's that for a segue? How do you think Apple is meeting its responsibilities for its users and as the world's most valuable company?
Very strong grade. I don't think I wouldn't give them an A. I'm trying to think of the best way to express it. I think that the most simple and direct way to explain any problems that I have with how Apple runs its business, and as far as whatever obligations, quote unquote, they have towards consumers, it's the Apple Watch edition. It's the $10,000 gold Apple Watch, and I look at how much brilliant engineering and what brilliant product design is happening everywhere. Where Motorola introduced a second generation phone of the version of the Moto G, which is a $179 phone that if you put it next to a premium feature phone that costs $600, $700, $800, you could certainly see that the body is made out of plastic instead of metal, but it's a high quality design. It's strong. You feel like you can drop it and it wouldn't break. The CPU is not as fast, but it is so fast that you really can't detect immediately any sort of difference between how fast it works. The camera is not great, but it's good. And the difference is that people who do not have $900 to spend on a phone can own their own phone for $179 instead. And Samsung and HP and all these other manufacturers are making Chromebooks and limited Windows notebooks that cost less than $300, and they're completely different from the cheap netbooks of 10 years ago. They're actually, again, well made, but they've been designed to simply run Chrome OS, which will attend to 80 to 90% of what people want to create. And last example, you have Amazon, who introduced the Kindle at $400, first generation, I think in 2007, and to be fair, now they make a high end and low end versions of that, but the exact same Kindle that they originally sold for $400 in a brand new form costs $59, and they've figured out that we have to figure out what can we do to make this as accessible as possible to the greatest number of people. There are a lot of self-interest in that to make sure they're capturing the market. But they're even so price sensitive. They said, you know what? If you have no problem with an ad on the lock screen, where when it goes into sleep there will be an ad for something, we will knock another $20 off this price. We really want people to be able to buy this if they want it. Apple could be making the best $600 notebook ever made. It would kick butt. They could make, simply by taking the handcuffs off of developers who are writing Apple TV apps, they could turn that $150 streaming TV box into a $150 streaming TV box that would also run Microsoft Office, the mobile version, like the iOS version of Microsoft Office, and the iOS versions of a lot of these productivity apps, and an iOS version of Safari. And they would have $150 per installation kick butt computer for any school computer lab, or just for the room of some 8 or 9 or 10-year-old kid who would be excited to have their own computer, not something they have to share with other people, that runs really reliably, has exciting software, and enables all kinds of potential. Instead, they chose to make a $10,000 solid gold gadget watch. So I guess that's in the area of disappointment. Now, Apple's not obligated to do anything. They're if they have an obligation, they have a greater obligation to their employees to keep them employed than they have to the consumers to sell them a $150 desktop computer. Nonetheless, when you see a company of such immense talent, such vision, and such genuinely high ideals, which they articulate brilliantly in so many other ways, you wish that they decided to not make the $10,000 solid gold gadget watch, and they decided to simply introduce a new version of Xcode that would allow developers to make desktop software for the Apple TV.
Fascinating observation. I'm not sure I see the necessary connection between the two. They could have done the Xcode version and still give. I mean, because there's a segment of people of the populace out there who want a $10,000 rose gold gadget watch. I don't think there's anybody on this podcast who wants one of those, because it doesn't make sense to me to have that. But there's a segment of the population that wants it. So if they can sell it and get that money. As a shareholder, and full disclosure, I do have a very small position in Apple stock. Certainly nothing that is meaningful to anybody but me. Don't they have an obligation to me as a shareholder to sell what they can market?
Well, to address that directly, Tim Cook has often been confronted with that at shareholder meetings. Saying that you're putting so much money into environmental features of these iPhones to make them comply with your own personal ideals of how green a device should be. That has nothing to do with government regulations. Aren't you being irresponsible? And his quick response has always been, "Well, this is how we choose to run our business in a way that we want to run it. And if you are upset with that, sell your stock. You will find many buyers because there's a very popular stock." My point isn't that they shouldn't be making a gold watch. I use the gold watch as an example that you have to think about what they had to do to start selling a $10,000 solid gold watch. They had to start positioning themselves as a luxury brand, not a premium brand and not a style brand, which is what they were when they were making laptops that cost a lot more money than competitors' laptops. They had to figure out how to market to people who are buying $10,000 watches and who would be likely to spend an extra $7,000 just for a non-plastic band for it. And to me, that underscores the idea that if they wanted to start to say we don't want to leave behind people who don't have a whole lot of money to spend on phones and tablets and computers, it would also take an incredible amount of engineering, an incredible amount of effort in order to learn how to market for that market. But they chose to market towards people who have $10,000 to $17,000 to spend on a gadget watch. So again, I don't believe that they're go back to my original point. They're not obligated to do anything but to keep their two things: to keep their employees employed, and that's super important. But also to run their business in such a way that they get to keep controlling their own destiny. They don't have to make a $300 laptop because that's where a lot of people are buying laptops, because they're starting to lose the education market, and their margins are so thin, their profits are so thin. They need to chase after whatever the market they can. And if schools say that, hey, if you made a $300 MacBook, we would buy 10,000 of them. Okay, that's great. We're gonna make 10,000. We're gonna make 10,000 $300 MacBooks. That's the power that they have by continuing to make their own decisions and to continue to be as wealthy as they are. They control their own destiny. All I'm saying is, your question was, is there something that their relationship with customers that I'm not going to try to quote you, but in terms of what do I think that they've been doing, how their relationship between themselves, their ideals, and their customers would be. And I'm saying that if there's one thing that disappoints me, it's that oftentimes they forget that technology can't help people if it is being regarded intellectually from a distance. If it's something that there's a difference that I can show you a $250 Samsung Chromebook, and it is nowhere near as cool as a $1,300 2015 MacBook. It doesn't do a fraction of what it can do. It's not nearly as pretty. It's a lot chunkier. The screen is not nearly as good. But take a kid who is, again, 8, 9, 10 years old, hand them this laptop and say that this is yours. This is your Chromebook. You can put stickers on it. You can write your name on it. You can put whatever you want on it. And if you drop it and break it, it's not going to affect me or your brothers and sisters because you broke your laptop. The amount of ownership and investment that a kid puts into a device that they own, that's theirs, they don't have to share it. It is their personal window into a larger and greater world. It's hard for me to. I believe that blunts the difference in engineering between the $1,300 machine that kid goes to the Apple Store and has a fun time playing with the Force Touch touchpad and oohs and ahs over how thin it is, but then has to leave and wave goodbye to the $1,300 laptop they got to use for 20 minutes while mom was getting her iPhone fixed. But then they will have in their backpack the $300 Chromebook that they have a name for. That's the sort of stuff that I think that Apple is missing out on. And again, they're not obligated to do any of that. But again, if I had the power to drive Apple into the ground by forcing them to do things, one of those things would be make sure that it's really, really clear that you're not leaving anybody behind by focusing on the higher end of the market.
So do you think there's anybody out there that is doing a better job in that area and servicing it and being successful?
Yeah, a couple organizations. The Raspberry Pi organization, for one, which is insane, $35, and you can get a real computer. You talk about ownership too. I mean, for $35 for the Raspberry Pi 2 computer, usually have.
Andy's looking for his Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're going to be sharing the video with people, but yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of these single board computers because I use them for all kinds of different projects. But so this costs $35. I don't know if, in case someone hasn't seen it before, this is a computer that runs Linux. It has 4 USB ports. It has a wired Ethernet port. It has HDMI and enough RAM and enough processing power that you can actually run a desktop operating system and run a web browser and a clone of Microsoft Office. Not only that, but it has a bare header of pins. So if you want to build your own hardware accessories for it, anything from I want to attach an LED that lights up and turns off based on the code that I run on it. Anything up to I want this to be the brains of a robot. I want these pins to control motors and sensors and cameras and stuff like that. You can do that. And you can buy for $15 a pretty box to put this in, and it can make it look like a little desktop computer. And $35. Do whatever you want with a kid, and not only is it yours, you don't have to share it. But again, if you want to make a digital clock out of it, make a digital clock out of it. If you wanted to, if you want to spin motors for it, if you wanted to control the lights in your house, and you want to, there are not only the ability to do that because everything is open and everything is programmable and everything is buildable, but also there's a huge community that will do nothing but help you to figure out how to do that. There's probably some other kid who also decided to figure out how to build a race car or build a robot out of it. You can just simply download those plans and buy the parts or scrounge the parts from an old broken VCR from your grandmother's house. And that is immensely enabling and immensely powerful. That's the best example of companies that's doing something like that. The other example is Google. But it's not as though they're doing that for altruistic reasons. Apple does what it does because their business is based on, we're going to only build hardware that we can make a lot of profit off of. It's not because they're greedy, because it means that they want to create a sustainable business for iPhones and for iPads. And they don't do that by taking a loss on each and every one of them, which is something that Amazon has often done on some of their products. Google has built a business saying that it is not important that we get money for the software that we create, because we will be making, the more people are using our systems, the more valuable these users are going to be, and the more valuable the ads that we're going to serve to them are going to be. But nonetheless, that means that they can write the Android operating system and give it away for free, so that when Motorola decides they want to try to make a great phone for less than $200, they don't have to worry about developing an operating system or licensing one, because here's one that costs nothing. They simply could get it and modify it for what they want to do. Schools are now standardizing on Google Docs, not because Google wanted to send their tentacles into schools, because it's a really great productivity suite with lots of tools that make it really great for classroom use, and it costs nothing. On and on and on. Maps, which would, again, we're both old enough that remember the first time that you could get maps on CD-ROM and on DVD, and every time it costs like $200 or $300 for the set, and whenever there was an update, it would cost another $50 or $60 for the updates. There were the first generation of in-car suction cup mounted GPS Garmin units that actually had live actual map data on it. And once again, for access to the map data, you had to pay $12 or $13, $14, because Garmin had to pay a lot of money to license that imagery. Google simply said that, great, we're going to be the map maker for the entire world, not just that, but the universe too. So if you want to walk on the near side of the moon, we will give you the map data in order to let you do that. Again, there's a long conversation to be had about the data that they collect. I feel as though they are good caretakers of the data that I'm giving them. I believe that it is an active transaction. And I also think that the more information that I give them within a certain limit, the better the experience that I have with Google products is going to be. But you can't fault the fact that it allows a $200 laptop to be really almost as powerful as something that runs Windows or Mac OS.
Remind me to go back to the Raspberry Pi, because I do want to ask a question about that. But I feel like this conversation has kind of come full circle when you bring up Google and you look at the fact that a lot of Google's revenue, I'm not going to pretend I can quote right off the top how much, but a huge percentage of it comes from their ad business and their mining of the data that you give them, that I give them, that everybody gives them. So it's a different approach to it. They can't or don't want to make the money off the hardware or even the software. They're making it off of creating more users that they can mine data off of, that they can then sell to advertisers. Two very different approaches, Google and Apple. I'm debating as to which one, because your points about Apple are very well taken. So I'm debating which one I'm more comfortable with, because they both represent a cost to me of one kind or another, and I'm debating which one I'm more comfortable paying.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable with Google if they were actually selling my data to advertisers, because they're not doing that. All they're doing is, when an advertiser says, please place this ad in front of 1,000 people who are college educated, who might be buying shoes in the next month and a half, the advertiser does not know that I fit that profile, and that I am indeed was searching for different shoe styles over the past couple of weeks. Google just simply has that information. They know that they can simply send that to the right party. Also, Google, after some significant bumps early on, has shown that they do take security very, very seriously. They also fight the good fight, where they are willing to, even if law enforcement says that, hey, we need you to hand over this information about this individual, they'll say, that's great. Of course, we're going to need you to file the requisite paperwork, and we will be filing an objection, so you're going to have to fight us in court. But if you win, of course. So I feel as though they are, you should always be aware of the transaction every single time. You should never do something that is you feel to be contrary to your own best interests. But I trust Google I trust that I'm making a good bargain with Google, whereas I don't always feel the same is true of Facebook. And I never feel the same is true of random ad networks that pop up in my Ghostery plugin when I'm browsing the web.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to get back to the Raspberry Pi because I'm familiar with it, but I've never played with one. The point I wanted to ask you is, what'd you say, $35 for the Raspberry Pi? So what would a fully featured Raspberry Pi, what is it possible to buy a fully featured Raspberry Pi? And what I mean by that is, with a keyboard, with the software to run the things you talked about, is it possible to buy a consumer level Raspberry Pi, for lack of a better phrase?
I guess it would depend on the definition of consumer. The thing is, this is complete as is. So you could go into your closet, pull out a USB mouse and a USB keyboard that you're not using, plug them in, plug this into, again, it's just simple bog standard HDMI. You can plug it into whatever TV you're not using, whatever old monitor you're not using, and you've got computer, you've got keyboard, you've got mouse, you've got screen. And when you set up for the first time, it walks you through, okay, we have 7 different versions of Linux available. Some are for robotics, some are for tinkerers, some are for app developers, some are just for people who want it super cheap. Productivity computer. Which one do you want? It will simply, great, I will download and install that for you. Once you've got that installed, now there's an app library of, again, open source and free software. So if you want LibreOffice to do spreadsheets and documents, you simply get that for free. So really, it is a consumer grade thing, simply out of the box. Maybe if you don't want to be Blade Runner or Mad Max about it, maybe you do want to spend $15 for a pretty attractive red case that makes it look like something that's quite pretty. But that's the whole thing about it. It can be whatever you want it to be. One of the reasons why I have so many of these is that I forgot to mention, it also has like a micro SD storage slot, so you can basically have like a floppy disks inside it. So I actually have one of these in a project case. If I know that I'm going to be traveling a lot for the next 2 or 3 or 4 months, I will load up a really super high capacity memory card with like 24 high def movies and just put it inside this little box. And when I check in my hotel, I plug it into the TV in the hotel room and plug it from the micro USB power connector to get power. And this is my little video server. It's my little super VCR entertainment center that drives things. So it can be really whatever you want it to be. And if you want it to behave like a consumer desktop computer, you can certainly do that.
Interesting. Now, you just cost me money because now I want to go get one and play with it. So, Andy, we got to do it more often. It's fascinating to hear your insights and your thinking on things. And I know I've come away with this with a lot to think about myself. I hope we've given the viewers and the listeners sort of the same thing.
I hope so. Again, we're really comfortable with you. You're a great host, and knowing you for years and years and years. So anytime you want to have me back, just ask. You got it.
Right quick, where should we send people to find you? I know we talked about it up front, but what are the 1 or 2 best places to locate you and links to everything you're doing?
The easiest one-stop shopping is to simply follow me on Twitter, where I'm just simply at Ihnatko. So just spell it Ihnatko. I almost always post links to wherever I'm publishing, as I'm publishing them on that account, along with all kinds of nonsense that flits through my brain over the course of the day. You can also visit ihnatko.com, my blog, which is not updated as often as or aggressively as maybe I should. Usually I'm not writing stuff for the blog because I'm writing stuff for everybody else. But those are the 2 places to go look.
Great. Good to see you, my friend.
As you. Thank you.
Take care. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Notables on Mac Voices. We hope we've given you a lot to think about and that you will come back next time where we will give you more to think about. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.